Welcome to part 3.
If terrorism is all just a backlash against Western foreign policy, why are most victims of terrorism other Muslims?
Most victims of terrorism are other Muslims because of something called foreign military intervention. You see, before the USA illegally invaded Iraq, suicide bombings were so rare in the region. And ever since the invasion of Iraq, terrorism in the region has increased by 600%. This happens when you destabilize a country, allow fringe groups to form, and then arm them. Seeming the population is largely Muslim, they too will logically also be the victims of those who take advantage of this instability in the land.
Why do you constantly invoke the Crusades, a 600-year-old defensive war, to make apologies for modern-day Islamic terrorism?
People bring up the Crusades because people often tend to forget the dark histories that pretty much every religion has faced. And seeming Islam is one of the newest kids on the block. It's still got many teething issues, and people will attack Muslims today and forget the history of all other groups, which span from the dawn of man up until the last couple of decades, where terrorism was something you would mainly hear about in Ireland, for example.
Why do you complain about...
Well, that's part of the problem, isn't it? I mean, Muslims bring up the Crusades to remind the Christian missionaries who keep continuously attacking Muslims that Islam and what's happening in Syria and Iraq is the foundation of the Prophet Muhammad, and that this is Islamic. This is part of the Islamic Crusades back in history, the Mujahideen of the history, the Khilafah of the history. So they always tie a relationship between that. So do you condemn that, Mr. Paul? Do you write about that? Do you put YouTube videos about that, saying that this is hypocritical to conflate what is happening with the Western nations going over and bombing Iraq and Syria and conflating that to the Crusades? Do you also accuse Christians who actually conflate what is happening in Iraq and Syria, conflating that to Prophet Muhammad's wars? Do you accuse that? Do you critique those Christian missionaries who make the same arguments? Besides, the Muslims have got probably more of a leg to stand on bringing up the Crusades because, I mean, yeah, maybe the Crusades didn't come on horseback and, with their shields and swords. They basically came here to Australia with their guns, shooting the native people of this country and building their churches. Yes, building their churches on the native land of these people. And they came over here and they raped and pillaged the land, and the indigenous people sold their children into slavery and stolen generation. And you know what? They built up their country on the blood of the native people. Could we call that crusade? Maybe we can. Why did they come and build their churches here? So it's probably, Muslims have probably got more of a leg to stand on to bring up the Crusades than it is for Christians to tie a relationship between ISIS and what is happening, between Prophet Muhammad and ISIS and what is happening in Syria and Iraq. Besides, it was the Bush administration that actually said when they went into Iraq that this is a crusade. That came out of George W. Bush's mouth, right? So that's what he said. He called it a crusade. I don't know. Maybe you need to go and pick it out with him.
Which spanned from the dawn of man up until the last couple of decades, where terrorism was something you would mainly hear about in Ireland, for example.
Why do you complain about France banning the burkini, when if Western women visited beaches in Islamic countries wearing what they wanted to wear, they'd be attacked and imprisoned?
I don't actually think you've been to any Muslim countries, have you? Well, I have. I saw women in bikinis in Turkey, and I saw women in bikinis in Oman swimming in the oasis regions, and I saw women in short skirts in shopping centres in Dubai, completely defying the dress modestly signs plastered outside the windows. And I did not see a single woman in these conditions getting attacked. Besides, banning the burkini is absolutely ridiculous because it covers no more than a standard snorkel suit does. So,
why do you try to shout down?
And like I said in part 1 of my video, we are not disgusted or upset because France is simply, or the Western world is simply banning the bikini or the burqa. Like I said in part 1 of my video, that yes, Muslim countries do have dress codes and regulations and so forth, but here is the hypocrisy. You claim that in the Western world you have religious tolerance for other people's faiths where they can dress up any way, shape or form, yet you, who are the people who are claiming that you follow liberalistic views, you follow freedom of rights and freedom of expressions, yet you hypocritically ban Muslims from wanting to wear their religious garments. You see the double standards and the hypocrisy, you see? See, if a Muslim country said, yeah, we believe in complete freedom of religion, complete tolerance and so forth, yet they started putting bans, I'd point a finger at them and say, hey, you're being a bit hypocritical. But you see, that's exactly what the West are doing. Every country, every system, whether it be religious or secularism, they all have a dress code. I mean, I can't go and work at McDonald's wearing shorts, can I? Or a girl can't go to McDonald's wearing a bikini. Now, can she? Even McDonald's has a dress code. So the point of the matter is that you look worse in the secular world when you're claiming that you are the upholders of liberalistic views, yet you're putting bans and regulations. That's exactly what we're seeing in France under the motto of security, which is basically a smokescreen because you can wear motorbike helmets and so forth, yet that is apparently not a security threat for concealing identity.
Criticism of Islam by calling it racist, when Islam isn't a race.
The famous, but Islam is not a race cry. Yes, we know Islam is not a race, but you're still likely still a racist. And this has been proven time and time again. Look, I'm all for critical analysis of all religions, including Islam, in a civil, professional, and respectful environment or discourse. Yet drawing stereotypical caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad with a turban and a bomb on his head with an ugly hook nose does your cause no favors. Believe me.
Why after every...
And here is another point. When they talk about Islam is not a race and so forth, these people are actually racist. Have you ever heard of these people say to you, hey, go back to Europe? They don't say go back to Europe, they say go back to the Middle East, right? That's where they think all Muslims come from. So they're actually racist in their sentiments. Yes, they truly are. They in fact refer to Muslims as camel herders, as if we all come from the Middle East. And when does the West define what is basically acceptable speech and what is not? So you can be, Islamophobic and so forth, but you can't be racist or sexist or homophobic, and you can't even be anti-Semitic, yet anti-Semitism is not a race as well. You could be a Jew, but you could be white, and you could be from Poland. You don't have to necessarily be from Jerusalem, so yet you can't be anti-Semitic, yet Judaism has nothing to do with race. Well, the religion anyway. Besides, we have hate laws, religious vilification laws, so again, Muslims are still protected, even like, for example, in Australia, in Victoria in particular, they're protected against religious vilification. I could actually sue someone for religiously vilifying me. So it doesn't mean that because it's accepted in your part of the world, it's accepted in all parts of the world. Are you now going to have a go at secular constitution about that? But it's interesting because they say things like, "Oh, but Islam is a choice. We can criticize that, but racism is not a choice, or homosexuality is not a choice." But that argument again is nonsensical because you can be a homosexual, and I'll post a link below this video where a homosexual, and it's been reported on CNN, went from being an extreme homosexual to someone who is straight. Yes, and that was proven that that person under intense therapy actually achieved it. So this nonsense that, oh, you're born with it and you can't change, is a bunch of nonsense. And even with that proof and that theory, you know what? They basically still say you can't be homophobic. And like Brother Rami said, there is no problem in criticizing Islam as long as it's done in a respectable fashion. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I had to go at the American people and I started burning their flag, that's going to cause a reaction, isn't it? People are going to get upset and angry and want to pick a fight. If I, for example, went to the Anzacs of the National Army of Australia, and went to a historical gravestone of an Anzac, a fallen Anzac, and I denigrated that grave and I had a "we" on it, I basically, defecated on it. You know what? Is my freedom of expression going to be tolerated? No, I'll probably be all over the media. I'll probably be kicked out of Australia. I'll be shamed. They'll probably try and execute me, right? So when it comes to their concerns and something that's valuable to them, then it becomes a priority to protect anyone against slandering and so forth, something that is sensitive. But when it comes to Islam and Muslims and you want to burn the Quran and insult the Prophet in the most horrendous ways and draw these funny pictures, now that's completely acceptable. This is a system of Dajjal, system of the Antichrist, full-blown attack against religion, but their own sacred practices. There's no more tolerance towards that sort of stuff. And I'll post a hyperlink below this video. You will see that even in the Australian media, people who made some criticisms against the Israelis for their treatment of the Palestinian people and they drew cartoons. They actually drew cartoons criticizing the Israeli government. And guess what? The Australian public forced that newspaper to remove its cartoons because they felt that they were harassed and oppressed and discriminated against. So notice, when it comes to the Jews, the Zionists and so forth, there's discriminations, there's anti-Semitism, it's not acceptable. But when it comes to Islam, it's a different stance.
Islamic terror attack is your primary concern a backlash against Muslims? Like, if a far-right troll kills Muslims, should our primary concern be a backlash against far-right trolls?
Yes, of course Muslims do not want to be incorrectly held as terrorists because of the actions of such people. And they do fear a backlash because they see a backlash. Is the burning down of mosques, the rise of far-right parties, vandalism of Muslim businesses, and everyday attacks on everyday Muslims worldwide not enough evidence that they have enough reason to fear a reactionary response by bigots, just like that mosque shooter in Quebec?
If the West is so selfish for not taking in enough Syrian refugees, why have the 5 wealthiest Muslim countries taken in virtually no Syrian refugees?
Look, why don't we forget the wealth for a moment? The fact of the matter is, Muslim countries have taken in the most amount of refugees compared to everywhere else in the world. Countries like Lebanon and Turkey have taken such huge volumes of refugees that the refugee numbers alone have almost doubled the official population of the country, just like in Lebanon. So why is it to you that the wealthy Muslim countries are representative of the refugee issue, yet the poor and modest Muslim countries that have taken in so much, despite having so little, are not the shining examples you choose to reveal. Makes you think.
If the West
Also, let us point out that it is actually more befitting and more incumbent that the West actually take in those refugees. And why do I say that? Well, they're the, excuse me for my French, the bastards that are going out and bombing the Syrian people indiscriminately and the Iraqi people. So if they actually care about the safety of the vulnerable people who are trying to flee that, they should actually take the humanitarian cause to actually take and harbour and protect those people. If you're going there to bomb it, why should another Muslim country have to go through that sacrifice and take in those people when it's your stupid, relentless bombs that are bombing those people? So it's like you go and create all this war and bomb these people, and then you expect other Muslims to clean up your mess. Amazing hypocrisy, really. Disgusting. And I know what you'll say. You'll say, Americans didn't have nothing to do with ISIS. Bullshit. It was your American forces that went in, created instability, which created these fringe groups, and that's why you feel embarrassed that you want to go back into Iraq to clean up the mess that the Bush administration created. And then you have the nerve to say, those Muslim countries don't take in refugees.
is so evil, oppressive, and Islamophobic. Why'd 50 million of you live here?
Finally, why do 50 million of us live here? Well, because we actually have no issue with you. So before getting your knickers in a knot with your ignorant, sweeping generalization about us alien mob that you are clearly not fond of, try and get to know one or more and ask them these so-called groundbreaking questions. Now, I hope I assisted in shedding some light to your queries. And if you have any further questions, reach out to me. My name is Rami, I live in Australia, and I'm a Muslim. Peace.